Hello everyone. In a minute I'm going to show you this old 25mm army that I've got out of the cupboard. But before I do that, I wanted to just have a little bit of a discussion, and I'm going to end the video as well on another discussion, just a brief topic. And both the sort of preamble and the topic at the end are really linked by a channel that I subscribe to, which is HeresyProducktionz, which is a channel put out by Palmer in Canada. And the reason I mention his channel is that the other day I was just sort of surfing around various YouTube channels, and one of the things that I like to do is to look at people's playlists and go through the videos that they have liked, that they have given a thumbs up to, because I can almost guarantee that if it's a channel that I like, I am going to like what they like, if you see what I mean. Now, I don't know why it is, but a lot of channels do sort of subscribe to one another and like one another's videos, but they don't always demonstrate that they have done so. And I can sort of see that in some respects, that you don't really want to be shown to be favouring one channel over another, possibly. But it does make it impossible for me to do what I do, which is to have a look at what people are liking and then to watch that video myself. So in other words, if you do configure your channel so that your liked playlist appears on your front page, it is going to make it much easier to expand the wargaming community on YouTube. And I half suspect that a lot of people aren't keeping their liked playlist off their front page deliberately. They're just doing it because that is the way they applied the settings when they set their channel up, and they may not even be aware. I know I had to originally, my liked videos weren't appearing on my front page, and I actually had to go into the settings and reconfigure it. It's quite easy to do. I forget how I did it, but it's not rocket science. It's very easy to do. This is the point, that when I was looking at Palmer's channel the other day, he had liked a video that had been put out by a YouTube channel that I'd never heard of before. And I went to this channel to see what it was all about, and remarkably, the channel was only set up, I think it was October the 19th, 2017, and today's date is the 30th of October 2017 when I'm filming this. But Palmer had actually spotted this channel about 4 days after it was established, and liked the only video that the chap has got on his channel at the moment. How he managed to find it, I have absolutely no idea. At that point, this new channel had 4 subscribers, and as I say, on other sides of the Atlantic. So well done, Palmer, for spotting it. And the channel, I'll put a link down below to it. I don't often give shout-outs, usually because by the time I get around to discovering these channels, everyone else knows about them anyway. A good case in point, by the way, being a new channel called Sergeant Historian, which, if you haven't heard of it by now, go to it and subscribe to it, because it's a really interesting channel. But this channel, anyway, Palmer's discovery, was a channel called the Enigmatic Gamer. Now, he had put out a video just displaying, showcasing his sort of 30 years war stroke English Civil War figures, and I really enjoyed looking at them, which is why in a minute I'm going to show you this army that I thought sort of paralleled it, but in Eastern Europe rather than Western Europe. But before I go on to that, this business of not putting your liked playlist onto your front page goes a little bit further than that, because I've often gone to, if people have commented on any of my videos or have subscribed to my channel, I've often looked at their front pages as well to see if they have any video content of their own, and it often appears to me that they don't. Their front page is completely blank, and if that's the case, then I usually don't click subscribe, because there's no point. But it now turns out that hidden behind those blank pages there often is video content, and I've no idea why that happens, but it's another appeal really to everybody watching this, that can you check your own settings on your own front pages, and if it is your intention to have your liked playlists visible to other viewers, then click on that. But also set your channel so that your playlists appear, because the Enigmatic Wargamers page, for instance, just looks like a blank screen to me. It's got his a really beautiful headline photo of a looks like a World War I plane, a model of a plane flying past. Really nicely painted. I'm looking forward to seeing some more videos on that subject if he gets around to producing them. But there are a lot of channels like that, and I think it could be something to do with what you're using, whether you're using an Apple device rather than a sort of Windows-based laptop. I'm not sure. I know in the past Pete from Mini Warzone has given shouts for some YouTube channels on his YouTube Channel of the Week series, and when I've gone to them, they've looked blank to me, and he's commented that they're not blank to him, so that might be part of the problem. But I think there are other people who set their channels up and aren't taking care about the front page of their channel, to make it obvious to people that there is content there and what the content is. I mean, I'm partly guilty of that myself, that I still, after a couple of years, I still haven't put up an introductory video to my channel. But I think from what I can see, because you have the option of looking at your own channel as a new visitor would see it, and as a returning subscriber would see it, I think my front page has got a kind of basic outline and kind of guide about what I've got on it and where to go to see videos on particular subjects and so on. But anyway, yeah, so there are quite a lot of channels like that. I mean, the Enigmatic Wargamer is a case in point, but another one that I did realise some time ago was another subscriber and another channel you'll probably know, called Andy Mack. Whenever I go to his front page, unless he's put a video up really recently, he's just got a blank page as far as it seems to me. And another person is a really good channel. I've been watching a couple of his videos on DBA recently, called a chap called Tony Aguilar, and it's the same thing. He subscribed to my channel some time ago now, and I looked, couldn't see that he had any video content on his channel. So I've only recently returned the favour and subscribed to his, because he commented on one of my videos, saying, why don't you have a look at this video that I put up? And I looked, and I hadn't realised he was putting videos up. So that's really the message I want to get out, is that lots of people do shout outs for one another's channels, but we can all help ourselves to expand the community by the way we present the front pages of our channels. Okay, right, I'll stop waffling. So, as I said earlier, this is a very old army that I started collecting, I think probably 1987. I know I bought a lot of the figures from a shop in Broadstairs when I used to live in Thanet, and I moved away from there in 1988. And the last time I put brush to figure was the year I moved into my present address, which was 2001, because I can remember sitting at the desk on Christmas Day in 2001, painting some of these as well. So I've been collecting them slowly over the years, and I've still got lots to paint, but I really like this army. And oh yeah, this is the other thing. This army, even though some of them have been painted, what's that, nearly 30 years, have never seen action on the tabletop. I've never played a war game with them, ever. But I do like the period, and it sort of comes and goes really with me. As you're probably aware, I flit around from one subject to another. But anyway, yeah, basically, this period is known as the Polish Renaissance, or the Eastern Renaissance. I'm never quite sure why it's described as a Renaissance, because it's a different time period to the Renaissance that took place in Western Europe, and I don't really feel that there was any great revival as such of science and art and culture and so on. It was just the period when Poland and Lithuania were combined into a commonwealth. They were extremely powerful and influential state in the middle of Eastern Europe, and the wars and the battles that they fought spread across a huge area. So their enemies included the Ottoman Turks, the Cossacks of the steppes, either fought with them or against them, the Muscovites, the Swedes, the Crimean Tartars, and again the Tartars did supply them with auxiliary troops now and again for some of their battles. So there's a real nice mix of nations and armies that you can throw into the war games. Really colourful period, full of detail and full of instant. Really good fun to war game. And on the subject of colour as well, you won't see for the moment, but I'll show you these as an example of what I'm talking about. The uniforms that the Poles wore were really elaborate and full of style and panache and bling. And one of the things that they did really was to kind of adopt fashions and accoutrements that they picked up on campaigns. So they would adopt the styles and the dress of the armies that they opposed. So this is probably a good example, this character here. So everybody knows about the famous Polish winged hussars, but the wings themselves probably were, I'm not sure if there's an example in here, probably were adopted from the Tartars who rode, there's an example there's some Tartars, who rode with these bizarre frames with feathers on them behind their backs, possibly because they were keen on the use of the lasso, and it might have foiled attempts to lasso them and take them off their saddles. I don't know. But another theory is that these wings made a terrifying kind of noise when the horses were charging, and en masse they produced this really eerie, frightening sound that freaked their opponents out. That's one thing. Another example would be things like this, wearing this leopard skin, kind of wearing animal furs, really. Yes, it was done by earlier armies, ancient armies and so on, but this practice of wearing leopard skin and so on is really where modern day armies get their influence from. It's via the Polish armies of this period that things like maces and leopard skins and that kind of thing have been incorporated into modern armies, and you still see them in ceremonial dress. I mean, classic, if you watch the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace and that kind of thing, or the trooping of the colour, you'll see a lot of influence that has filtered through from these Eastern European armies. Another thing you'll notice here is the horse that has been dyed. Its flesh has been dyed. Supposedly, this is meant to stop the horse from, if it's a pale coloured horse, to stop its appearance from being besmirched by mud and so on that's been flung up from the ground. I think nowadays reenactors and wargamers have more or less come to the conclusion that this sort of dye effect wouldn't have been worn into battle. It was more for kind of parades and display, but that hasn't stopped me and a multitude of other wargamers painting a lot of their horses in that way, because it looks good on a tabletop. Yeah, so basically I'm going to take the camera off its tripod now and just give you a closer look at these figures, and then as I say, at the end of this I want to come back to Palmer's channel and talk about a subject that he raised. Right, here we go. So excuse the shakiness of my handheld camera, but I'll start at one end and work down the line. So we've got a couple of artillery pieces. Most of this army is Wargames Foundry, but did have to sort of supplement it with some Old Glory in particular, and another range called the Assault Group. I've got a few of their figures. So this artillery piece, I'm pretty sure, I seem to remember, is Old Glory. I'm pretty certain about that. I don't think the figures look like Foundry style. So there's a cannon there. And then I've got lots of winged hussars. All these figures are based on a DBX style of basing, so most of the bases are 60mm wide by 40mm deep for the cavalry. And I've got a huge disproportion of winged hussars, far more than I need, but there we go, they're fun to paint, so why not. You can see some of them there that I have painted. I was talking earlier about that dyed effect on the pale horses. Not easy to store, not easy to transport. The wings you have to stick onto the backs and you have to stick the lances on, and it all takes up room, but also it makes them a little bit difficult to handle. Hasn't happened to me recently, touch wood, but I'm often picking them up and pinching off the wings and having to stick them back on and so on. I got the pattern for the cloaks on those guys at the back there. It was sort of drew on an illustration in the Osprey book, but it's really strange. It's all crescents and stars and so on a red cloak. Really kind of crazy clothing and uniforms that they wore. So those are the winged hussars. We go a bit further along here, so I've got few infantry. These chaps here would do for registered Cossacks. So the Poles and the Lithuanians did employ Cossacks in their army, either as kind of auxiliary troops, so the Cossacks would be dressed in their kind of traditional gear, or else as what was known as registered Cossacks. So the Cossacks were contracted to supply a number of troops on a regular basis to the Polish-Lithuanian army, and those would probably have been, or almost certainly were, dressed in a uniform supplied by the Poles. So that is kind of the appearance that uniform would have had. So they would do for registered Cossacks. And then all these guys here were known as haiduks. So I've got quite a lot of them. Another example I was talking about earlier about influences from other armies and so on, but the use of bagpipes and even to an extent drums. It has filtered through the Polish army into use in Western armies. I mean, I know you need a drum to beat marches and so on and keep step, but yeah, drums on horseback as well, such as that guy there. I mean, how many times do we see that now in on Horse Guards Parade, Trooping of the Colour and so on? But there's a very strong link with armies of this period. Anyway, get to the end of the line of haiduks. Those front infantry are all Wargames Foundry. And I've got a few command stands here. Chap in the middle there is the assault group. I think that is a set. I don't think I put those figures together myself. I think that is a blister pack or a pack that they sell as a group. The commander is actually, I've forgotten his name, but he is actually a named character from history. Whereas this chap here is Wargames Foundry, and he's just a generic commander. And on the other side here. This is a Cossack command stand, again from the assault group, and again I think that is one group, and it's got a really nice touch. The chap on foot with his one leg up on a cannon, small little artillery piece, really like that. And then behind them there's a group of Cossack cavalry. Those figures are from Old Glory, and Old Glory has a really sort of extensive range of figures, and their Cossacks are sort of split into two groups, and I forget that. I think there's one group called Cossack Wars, which is based on a title of that is based on the title of a rule set that they do, and those figures tend to be a little bit more kind of cartoonish, and that's what these figures are from. So they do have a little bit of a kind of cartoonish sort of look to them. The figures are more kind of characters, as it were. And their other range isn't like that. Right, and then over here we've got lots of Pancherny, I think it's pronounced. They're basically Shoni Cossacks, they're known as, but they weren't actually Cossack. But they're sort of armoured cavalrymen, armed with variety of weapons, bows, muskets, maces, swords, that kind of thing. And they are a mix of Old Glory and War Games Foundry. The Old Glory come with more differences in the weapons, so that chap firing the bow, for instance, that stand there is Old Glory, whereas the slightly larger figures, I think those guys there are War Games Foundry. And then right at the end here, got another artillery piece, which is from Old Glory. Right, okay, so I think that's everything. So I'm going to put the camera back on its stand now and go back to another topic that related to this army, but it's a subject that was raised by Palmer on his recent Heresy Hub Day. Right, now Palmer recently raised the subject on his channel of, he asked the question, do his viewers get anxious if they accumulate too many figures to paint? I think that was the crux of his conversation anyway. And my answer is no, I don't. In fact, quite the opposite. I get anxious if I don't acquire figures. I find it very reassuring to have a lead mounting. And this army is classic example of why that is the case. Those figures that I was showing you earlier, particularly the War Games Foundry range, as I say, I bought those in the 1980s, and for a long time Foundry stopped manufacturing them. They'd kept the moulds and all that kind of thing, but they struck the Polish Renaissance range out of their catalogue. I would have really freaked if I'd got halfway through painting an army and then found I couldn't finish the project, because it takes me years, 30 years in this case, and I mean, it was quite a relief to see that they'd brought the armies back, but they brought them back and sold them in different ways. They clustered them figures together, whereas they used to sell figures individually. They put them together into blister packs and so on, so they sold them slightly differently, and I suspect that they didn't resurrect the entire range. I don't know, I'm not sure about that, but anyway, it didn't affect me because of my policy of buying masses and masses of stuff, so that I always had a reserve to fall back on. And another thing that even 30 years ago I was planning for was my retirement. I mean, wargaming has been a big part of my life. I've spent a lot of my spare time on it, and I knew, and I was aching for the time when I would be retired, and I knew that I was going to spend a lot of my retirement wargaming. But equally, I was aware that I probably wouldn't be able to spend the money in retirement that I had available when I was working and young and energetic and able to do lots of overtime and all that kind of stuff. So I thought it was an investment for the future. So yeah, I'm perfectly happy living with the fact that I have a lead mountain, and most of it I will never get round to painting. But this is why I will never, or very rarely, get rid of anything that I have bought. I will dispose of things that I know are never going to draw me in the future, and I will get rid of things that I know I have got something I would prefer to paint up and put in my army than that. So an example of that would be a couple of years ago I ditched a lot of my Dixon Samurai because at the time I bought them, Dixon's was one of the few ranges that did a kind of comprehensive range of Samurai, but that range to me has been surpassed by just about everything that has come since. I'm one of those people that really don't appreciate Dixon figures, so I knew I was never gonna paint those, and I had a whole stash of unpainted Oriental figures that I could replace them with. So that's an example. But anyway, to give you an impression of quantity, this box, which is probably over a foot tall and maybe a foot deep by 9 inches wide, is full of figures that just relate to the 17th century and in the main are relevant to the Eastern European theatre. There are some English Civil War figures in here, 30 years war figures, but the majority of them are Poles and Cossacks and Ottoman Turks, and it is just so heavy. I'm not a good judge of weight, but I can just about lift that. But yeah, I've got things like the Warlord, Polish Winged Hussars, lots of figures from the assault group. These are Tartars. Oh yeah, this is another nice touch about the. Let's give a quick shout out for the assault group. When you buy a certain amount, I don't know if they still do it, but they used to have. You used to be able to choose a special edition figure. So I've got one of a Cossack drinking from a canteen there, having a merry time. Lots of Old Glory, Tartar cavalry, Cossacks with lances. Yeah, so these ones I was saying earlier, these are from their standard Cossack range, I think, rather than the Cossack Wars. So these look a little bit more historical, shall we say. The weapons aren't like blunderbusses and things like that. They're more appropriate kind of things. German pikemen. well, I couldn't. Yeah, I'm not going to go right to the bottom of the box. Cossacks with firearms. These are War Games Foundry. So these, you can see, I clearly bought these when they were sold loose as individual figures. So that they probably date back to the early 90s. I don't know. Oh, it's handy. Things you find. Got an old War Games Foundry catalogue here. Not sure it's got a date on it, but that shows you the range as they used to sell it. Yeah, I mean it's like a treasure trove really, and it's there. And every time the urge comes to paint some figures, I know I can delve into this, and I've got what I need in there. I think the most recent thing I purchased was about a year or so ago, where I bought a lot of stuff from Essex, of kind of Cossack wagons and that type of thing. So one day I will have an army to fight against this army of Poles, and at least be able to have a solo game, if not a game against an opponent. So there we go. That's my little showcase of my army, and discussion about various things YouTube related, and an answer to Palmer's recent topic for discussion on his channel. I think that's everything I want to say. Yeah, thanks very much for watching everyone, and see you on the next video. Bye for now.